Hi, welcome to the Phil Cooke podcast. You know, one of the biggest questions I get these days from churches, ministry organizations, nonprofits is how has the digital revolution changed fundraising? Some people say direct mail is done. Some people say it has to be through a QR code. Other people say toll-free numbers still work. There's a lot of questions out there. And so I went to Mark Dreistadt, the founder of Infinity Concepts in Pittsburgh, has been an agency for a long time, and they've had a number of nonprofit organizations from around the world, ministries, churches they work with. And Mark has really kept up to speed on how digital tools can impact fundraising, what works, what doesn't. And so I wanted to bring him on today and talk a little bit about fundraising from that perspective. So if whoever you are, church, ministry, nonprofit, if you're trying to raise money, this is going to be a great episode for you. You should really stay tuned because I think it's going to answer a lot of questions and clear up a lot of things that people wonder about today. So stand by and we're going to interview Mark Dreistadt. Well, Mark, welcome to the podcast. You and I go back, I don't know, how far do we go back? We go back a long way.
A couple of decades, maybe 3 decades.
Yeah, maybe 3 decades. I don't know, maybe more than that. But we've been involved in religious ministries, Christian ministries, television stations, churches, all kind of stuff over the years. You've had a super wide range of experiences. In fact, you created Infinity Concepts, I think, as an agency built on that, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was the whole concept, that we would be a brand communication agency, that we could bring a lot of the disciplines under one roof so that we could be flexible and serve marketing needs, fundraising needs, public relations, all of that, all under one roof. And we've had 23 years of doing that. It's been pretty
And you're based in Pittsburgh, right?
Based in Pittsburgh, yep.
Based in Pittsburgh. So what I wanted to talk to you about today was fundraising. You know, you've been intimately involved with everything from television stations, nonprofit organizations, churches, ministries of all kinds. And the truth is, since you and I started out a long time ago, really direct mail was the primary means of fundraising for organizations. But all that's changed, right?
Oh, yeah. When we first started Infinity Concepts, I mean, we were talking about, letters and brochures. That was basically all that we were doing. What kind of brochures do we want? What kind of cards do we want? What kind of letterhead do we want? What kind of mail are we doing? But that's all changed now. Certainly, we're much more engaged in the digital space. Websites back when we first began were kind of like billboards. They just were pieces of information that a ministry existed and where the address and phone number was. And that was pretty much all that was there. And it's evolved quite a bit. But it's interesting to note that even though we are very involved in digital donor acquisition and email acquisition and, using web tools and texting for fundraising, all that, the basic of direct mail still is the core of most fundraising efforts today. It all kind of goes back to that. It's still very viable.
So what do you think that is?
Well, I think it's, there's a lot of different ideas about why that's the fact. I mean, I think in terms of engagement, I think digital is much more effective for engagement than direct mail was. Back in the day, used to do an acquisition mailer, you would rent a list of 100,000 names and put together 100,000 letters at 40, 50 cents a piece or whatever it would cost you. And you'd send that mailer out. And if everything went right, you'd get a 1% response. And maybe you could end up having a profitable experience. And that was really a science with a lot of risk. It was not finely tuned, but that was the way it was done. Now, by using digital means, it's much more cost effective to aggregate donors, to aggregate emails, and to begin the communication process. But what we find is that while people will oftentimes engage digitally, they'll go to a website, they'll go to a phone center. If there's a number on the bottom of the screen, they'll call the number and talk to somebody on the phone, or they'll respond to an email or a display ad. Once they get engaged, they tend to shift significantly over to direct mail. And I think it has to do with two things. One, I think it's the tangible. There's still something about holding something tangible in your hand. As much as you like ebooks and I like ebooks and we use those a
Yeah.
lot, there's still something about reading a real book and holding a real book. There's just
Yes,
something about
absolutely.
that texture in your hands, that continuity. And then I think the second thing is that a direct mail allows for longer communication, more in-depth communication.
Yeah.
I will read a letter that would be much longer than anything I'd read in an email format or on a
True.
website. That's more shorter communication. But I think if you want to communicate, a real vision or a mission or a problem that needs to be solved, I think a letter gives you a much better context to build your case and make that appeal.
What about the idea that older audiences are more comfortable with mail still, and
Yeah.
they're the ones with all the money anyway? So does that play into it any at all?
Well, it is interesting. We do research all the time. We work with gray matter research,
Hmm.
doing all kinds of. We usually do like 6 reports a year on different things about evangelicals. We focus specifically on the evangelical Protestant segment of the Christian community. And a lot of what we do is donor research, and it is interesting to see that in many ways, once people hit a certain age, they become more prone to charitable giving. There's sort of like when you're young, you're willing to go and do mission trips and do things.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of money, but you're willing to do, and you're willing
Yes.
to roll up your sleeves and get involved in volunteer projects. And then there's this sort of middle period where you're raising your family and you're still involved in church, you're still involved in helping here and there. But then as you get a little bit older in your 50s and 60s, there's a little more disposable income and a little more sensitivity to things that are spiritual. And so donors do tend to be, and have always tended to be, a little bit on the older side. Yeah.
What other techniques are more popular these days? I mean, you're doing what? Email blasts? What about I'm seeing QR codes on a lot more
Oh yeah.
television programs.
Yeah,
Even
QR
I didn't
codes
even
are,
think
are certainly a way, because when you're watching a TV program, the idea is how do you engage someone in a moment.
yeah.
There used to be the most effective way to engage somebody was with a phone. Get them to pick up the
Yes.
phone and dial a number. But now everybody has a phone in their hand, but they're much more likely to shoot a picture of a QR code and go to the website and engage digitally. We did a lot of research back some years ago when we were working with Cancer Treatment Centers of America. And we found that oftentimes television and radio were mostly successful in the area of building awareness, raising your profile, making people aware of what you were doing and how it was doing. But the engagement almost always happened in some kind of a digital format, where there was an opportunity for dialogue. When you're watching a television program, you're learning, you're
Yeah.
gaining, you're drinking it in, but you have to have a dialogue to have a donation. And so the however we can build that dialogue is the cost effective way to do it. So we pioneered a long time ago the idea of a digital donor acquisition program, and we had a client that had no footprint in the Christian community at all, but wanted to reach out and see if we could gain support. So we did an entire digital program for them. In the beginning, there was no direct mail, there was no television, there was no radio. It was just digital, and it took a little while. It takes a little bit longer, but what happens is that becomes exponential. And after a while, we started incorporating direct mail into it because people were wanting to convert over and give that way. We now have 30,000 donors for that particular organization that we have grown over the last 7 or 8 years,
Wow.
that are faithful and give and are generous. And it works. But we started by pioneering this donor acquisition program, where most programs talk about when they're using digital, they're using an ad or they're using email blast. They get you to sign up for an email list, and then in that email list, then they will
Right.
cultivate and eventually ask you for a gift. Well, what we decided to do was change the strategy and ask for the gift right from the very beginning,
Wow.
to create a compelling enough cause, a compelling enough reason that a person who is motivated by that mission, by that ministry, by that organization would say, I'd like to help, and do it right from the beginning. And It took a little bit of finessing. It took some creativity. It took some failures, but we finally found what we call the secret sauce. The right way you put it together, and people begin to respond. So immediately then you have a donor. And we've been able to build a program. And I had one of the organizations ask me, if I give you X number of dollars, can you double that money for me in a year? And I said, well, here's what I can do. If you give me, let's just say it's $100,000, just for a number. Right. You give me $100,000 at the end of a year, we'll probably be able to give you back about $75,000. About 3/4 of your money will come back in the first year, but you're going to lose some. If you give me that a second year, I'll get all your money back. So by the end of the second year, you would have given us $200,000 or invested $200,000. You would have gotten $200,000 back. You're break even. If you'll do it a third year, I'll triple your money.
Wow. Now, it's interesting. No, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt that.
That's literally the way it works, because it's exponential. Where direct mail was often transactional, digital becomes exponential because it builds upon the other. And so
you keep going back to your comment about everybody carries a phone with them, and that's changed so much in our life. I remember when we used telephone numbers on a TV program, I'd have to leave it up long enough for them to get out of the chair, go find a pencil and paper, write it down. You've been involved in that. And but now you're right. A QR code, they could just snap it with a phone out of their pocket or purse and be done with it. That's digital has really changed a lot. Now, that doesn't mean the old ways are dead. I mean, television is still,
by any means.
Would you say, if you have the budget for it, television is still kind of the top of the funnel?
Oh, absolutely. It's still the most pervasive. It's still the most pervasive influence media out there. If you want to gain an audience, you want to influence an audience, you want to cause people to understand your message and what you have to say, television, in my opinion, is the most effective tool out there. Because you're engaging people. Radio is effective too, but radio is a passive media. Television, it's an active media. You choose to watch it.
Yeah, and you're focused on it.
Yeah, and that, I believe, because of that, it's much more influential. It raises awareness at a much higher level, even than radio does. Although both are very, very good.
Well, I'm sure you've seen tons of responses from people that said, "I found your program stumbling, just changing channels." So, there's some interesting aspects to television that I think are still very much alive.
Yeah, absolutely, and it still happens that way. Lots of testimonies of that kind of thing taking place, and and of course, short form is now kind of taking off online. A lot of people doing YouTube videos and other short form videos that, again, can be used to engage people, raise awareness, and also generate support for ministries. We had a couple of statistics I shared with you back when we first started talking about this, and it was really interesting. You asked, what's the percentages of how people give, and the average. I went through several of our clients, a number of our clients that we have access to their data, and on average, 61% of the revenue comes through direct mail.
Wow.
From our broadcast clients. So it's, there's always been this debate when you do television. Do we ask for money or do we just try to acquire contact information? Yeah.
Yes.
And so, if you look at that data, that almost builds a case for, let's just acquire the names and then talk with them with direct mail.
Yes.
Because it's a much more effective. About 19% come from web donations. So 1 out of 5 gifts are coming through the website. So that could be somebody who gets an email or somebody who watches the show, and instead of responding to the phone number at the moment, they'll go to the website, say, who are these people? Check them out, and then make a gift directly on the website. The call center, we put the number up for the call center always. About 8% of the revenue comes through a call center. Now, you can't do without it. You have to have the call center. But, we tend to think, so much of the money is coming through the call center, but it's really just that initial gift. And that's representing about 8% of the total revenue, which is about the same as special events. If a ministry goes and has a ministry rally or a ministry event, on average, that's about the same amount of money that is raised, about 8%. And then when you go below that, the digital acquisition program is about 2 or 3%. An email appeal is about 2 or 3%. So those are smaller amounts, but they're often used in the acquisition process. And then people will oftentimes start with email or start with a website and then give through a direct mail response because it's there, it's in their hand. It's like paying a bill. They write a check or they go to the website or they respond somehow through that direct mail piece. It's still alive and well. Direct mail is not going anywhere for a long time.
So people that tell you direct mail is dead, TV is dead, don't listen.
Don't listen to them.
And further, television, if television is not paying for itself, that's okay if it's acquiring new names.
Right. And acquiring new names is really the most important thing because you have to begin a conversation. And so oftentimes, even with email or with some of the social media things we're doing, we'll often find that we get people responding to the email, but they don't fill out the form. And because of that, we created a new tool. Last year at NRB, we received an award for it. IDX Pro is what it's called. And it's a tool. It's a pixel you put on a landing page or a website. And when people come and visit that website or that landing page, we can identify about 50% of them. Just by the fact they're there. And it's all permission based. It's nothing. It's all absolutely 100% legal and appropriate. They're giving permission for you to do that. But we've been able to help ministries grow their email lists significantly by this means. And just think what this does for a PR campaign, Phil. If you're doing a big PR campaign, you're pushing a new book, you're pushing a new event that's happening or a cause that's happening.
Right.
You get people who come and visit that landing page, but you don't know who they are. That's always been the problem with a PR campaign. You don't know what the monetized value is. You know people are responding, but you don't know what they're doing. Well, now you can capture their emails when they come to visit that landing page. You now capture the emails. Now you can begin a dialogue with them. And we're finding we're having very, very strong response because people are already familiar with the cause or the ministry or the campaign. And so it's proving to be very effective because the whole thing is start the dialogue. Once you start the dialogue, then if your cause is worthy and if it resonates with the person you're talking to, then there's a really good chance they're going to stand with you and support you when the time comes.
Now, let's talk for a minute about response time to when people donate. You remember our old friend, Mary Hutchison, who passed away a number of years ago, fundraising expert. I remember she would just randomly send a $10 or $20 financial gift to ministries around the country just to see how long it took them to thank her. And she said she was always shocked. It would go weeks. Some ministries would go weeks and weeks without sending a thank you note or acknowledging the gift. How important is it that we respond right away when somebody gives?
Well, we tested this many, many years ago, and and it's some pretty strict parameters. And basically, what we saw was that every day, this is the rule of thumb I use, every day it takes for you to receive a thank you from a gift reduces your probability of giving again by 1%. So let's extrapolate that.
Yes.
So if I give a gift to a ministry and they send me a receipt once a month, there's a 70% chance I'll give again. But if I send a gift to a ministry and I get a thank you note back within 10 days, there's a 90% chance that I will give again. The ministry we tested this with was a fairly large ministry, but by changing their receipt processing time from 2 weeks to 2 days, we raised $100,000 a month for them.
That they weren't getting before.
That they weren't getting before, and they didn't have to do anything else. Just send the thank you sooner. And it's logical. If a friend of yours is getting married, and they invite you to the wedding, and they're good friends, so you and Kathleen do something very special for them because they're meaningful friends of yours. And so you go the extra mile and you give a gift, and they go off on their honeymoon, and they come back from their honeymoon, and weeks go by, and months go by, and years go by, and there was just no thank you that ever came. But down the road, there's now a baby shower, and you're invited to the baby shower. Yeah. Are you going to feel that same sense of, I just want to go over the top for these folks?
Yes. Probably not.
Probably not. But now let's invert that. If you went over the top, and then this couple goes off on their honeymoon, and while they're still on the honeymoon, they write notes, say, Phil and Kathleen, thank you so much. We really appreciate how much you did that. And you said, oh, they did that on their honeymoon.
That makes an impact.
What an impact. Now, when the baby shower comes around, guess what? You're going to want to go over the top again. Yeah. And it's the same experience in the donor relationship. It's a relationship. It's not a machine. By genuine, sincere, prompt thank yous, you can build a deep relationship with a donor. And it's sincere, it's real, and it's just taking time to care about it. I have a client that I gave a substantial gift to. There was a campaign that I really believed in. And so I gave a substantial gift to that client. We were not involved in their receiving. We do a lot of receiving for our clients, but this particular client, we weren't. And it took 6 weeks for me to get a receipt for a 4-digit gift. Okay. And then there was supposed to be a gift that came with that, a premium, yes, an offer. That took another 6 weeks. So it was 3 months before I received the premium. Now, I can tell you that while I love that ministry, it's unlikely that I'm going to give them a large gift again. And it's not it might be, if there's a compelling cause, I might. But I just feel like there was sort of a lack of care. And donors feel this all the time when a ministry doesn't respond promptly and honestly and warmly to a gift. It has an impact on the donor. I still believe in their ministry. I still think they're wonderful. Sure. But I want to give where I feel like my gift is being appreciated. Yeah. Everybody does.
Well, plus with other donors, a lot of that is impulse giving. They see a television program, or they see a brochure, or they get an email blast and they say, wow, I want to get involved in this. It touches their heart. And impulse givers, especially if you don't respond quickly, they'll cool down and go somewhere else.
Yeah, it's a one and done. And the whole idea is to build relationship. So it's not one and done, so that it is a repeat things. First, it'll be occasional, and then it can be regular. Typically, we see about 35% of our donors convert to what we call multi-donors. So we're getting about 1 out of 3 donors on average that are giving multiple gifts to a ministry. And a lot of that has to do with the way they're being thanked.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, this is a little bit of a sideline, but I'm on a kick right now of the contact us page on church websites. It's very similar. I've been testing those recently, and most churches in America have a contact us page where you can put your name, your email, your phone number, whatever, to find out more information. What I've discovered is about 5 to 10% will get back to me within a few days. Almost half get back to me in 2 to 3 months, and the other half don't get back to me at all. I mean, nobody's even checking. And so here are people that are inquiring about your church, that want to know more, that want to know, have a connection, and you're not even responding to these people. I mean, that's so lame.
And Phil, an easy fix for that too also is oftentimes it's info@firstchurch.org. It's not even a person's name.
Yes, true.
And if it could just be to Pastor Smith at firstchurch.org, that immediately builds a connection much more deeply than info at.
That's an interesting, I'm writing that down. That's good. Info. That's really good, because we have an info address. I'm going to get rid of it. All right. I won't use Pastor Smith, but that's really good. Okay. So let me ask you a couple other quick questions. I don't want to keep you all day. When you're starting out, this is the big challenge of all time. When you're starting out, where do you start with fundraising other than finding I'm sure the first step is find a big donor that will help you along the way, at least to start, maybe some board members that can help fund it. But where do you start in launching a new ministry, a new nonprofit?
That is the toughest part, because you have to have a platform. And so if you have an angel donor or donors that can kind of help seed it, it really doesn't take that much, but it does take something. then that certainly helps you build that platform. Because the first thing you have to think about, I remember years ago, Michael Hyatt talked about building the platform.
Right.
And you and I were talking about that years ago.
Yeah, he
And
wrote a
that's
book
really,
about it, I think. Yeah.
yeah. And that's really the basis for, you have to have the platform. So how are you going to get that platform? Pastors can get that platform from the congregation sometimes, or they can get it through a community ministry if a local ministry has. But I'm dealing with somebody right now. It's a pastor who retired
Yep.
from a very large church, 30,000 member church, and when he walked away, he unfortunately didn't think about it in advance and has nothing. And so I said, well, what emails do you have in your personal Rolodex? That's where we have to start. And so he was able to come up
Yes.
with about 200 people that he knew personally. And I said, okay, let's write to those 200 people. So we wrote to those 200 people and we asked them to support, and we started getting a little bit of support. And then we put the IDX Pro tool on his website. And whenever he goes to speak somewhere, he tells them to go visit his website. Well, when they do, we're able to capture their email. We start communicating to them. So now when he started with 200 people, he now has about 3,000 people, but less than a year later. And so we're building it by, finding the tools that'll help him aggregate the platform. And as we're aggregating the platform, he's getting more and more people who are making commitments and making gifts and supporting his work. But you have to build that platform.
I hadn't even thought about, until a few months ago, I hadn't even thought about starting with your Rolodex, starting with your contact list, personal.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a computer, everybody's got a contact list, and it may be a few hundred, a few thousand, whatever. But that's because these are people that know you and hopefully trust you and are willing to support what you're doing, or potentially.
And we helped this pastor write a very personal letter. It wasn't a form letter from an organization.
Right.
This was a personal letter. Listen, we've known each other for years. We've been partners in ministry. We've worked together. We've prayed together. We've cried together. We've laughed together. And now this is a new part of my life. It's a little bit scary for me. I'm not quite sure what God has in store, but here's what this is the way I'm going, and I'm looking for some friends who'll help me in this journey. Would you be one of those? And we got people responding.
Wow,
Started off with 20, then 30, then 50, then 70, but they're coming. And so it's where you begin. I think you start with what you have. What do you have in your hand? If it's a Rolodex of 100 people, that's where you start. If you have an organization that has a mailing list of 1,000 people, start with that. If it's a congregation of 300 people or 3,000 people, start with that. But start with what you have in your hand, and then it'll multiply.
So what about the strategy of acquiring names, other names, like buying or renting lists? Does that work?
It does if you get the right list. That's always the challenge. What we found is if a ministry has a great mission, a great vision, and can articulate it well, that's always the first thing. Because a poorly articulated vision is not going to gather the support that it deserves. So articulating it well, how important it is to get the messaging right. But once you have that, then using even Google ads done correctly, Facebook ads done correctly, email lists that you rent, but you have to rent the right list and use the right kind of email. Right. And we test and evaluate this all the time because the world is always changing. It used to be, if we thought about doing like a Google ad campaign, absolutely not work. Today, it works. In fact, Google outperforms social media right now. Now, that may not be true 2 years from now, but right now, if we put the same amount of money into a Google campaign and a Facebook campaign, we'd probably see that Google would give us better results.
Email. Now, you say, wait a second, you say you have to get the right list. How do you know you have the right list?
You got to have somebody that you're working with that knows those lists and know what they do.
These are people that have already given to an organization similar to yours, for instance?
Or responded. So like in our case, we have another, we have several companies, and one of them is Inspire Media Group. Inspire Media Group has 6 different brands that we have that are all different targeted lists. 2 of those lists are pro-Israel lists. So if we know somebody is a Israel-based ministry, those are the lists that are going to work best for them. One of our lists is a leader list. So if they're a pastor or business leader oriented list, that would be appropriate. So we try to find the match for the people. And outside of our list, that's also true. Other people who have lists as well. That you just need to
Okay.
find one that fits the right.
So if I'm looking for a list of barbecue chefs, finding a list of dog owners or dog groomers is probably not the way to go.
Probably not the way to go. Right.
Okay, good, good. All right, what have we left out? What do people need to know out there to really get into the fundraising trend that we see today? What things that are working? What do we need to forget about? What do we need to focus on? Any last
Okay.
thoughts?
Okay. Yeah. Recap. Number one is make sure you have something worth supporting, and that you articulate that mission in a way that is compelling, that's clear, easy to understand,
Good.
and that people understand how their gift can make a difference. If you get that done, that's half the battle. So many ministries do not articulate their mission well, and then they struggle raising money because they can't quite, or they try to say so much about the organization, about, oh, we were doing this, we did this, we did that, but it's not articulating the vision. And
Yeah.
so keep it focused, keep it clear, and then use digital means for acquisition is what we found. It's much more cost effective to acquire contacts digitally than through direct mail. Does direct mail still work for acquisition? Yes, but it's not as cost effective. And with a digital acquisition, you can have a monthly budget that is manageable. Where with the digital acquisition, you're dropping $100,000 at a time on a mailer. That's much more difficult for somebody, especially
Yeah.
starting out, to do. Digitally, you can do it with just an ad campaign, the right kind of ad campaign to support all of that. Putting something like an IDX Pro pixel on the site too also helps you to gain those contacts. When you do drive contacts to your website, that you can begin to talk with them. So by having that interaction, you can begin to share your message with them. So building it digitally, I think, is the key. But then don't just limit fundraising to digital. You certainly have to start there if you're beginning. You start there and build the base so you have enough using your own contacts, using the contacts you're able to acquire. You build it. Once you have a group of donors, now Mary Hutchison used to say 5,000 donors.
Yes.
We'll sometimes do it with 3,000 donors, but you have to
Okay.
do a certain type of letter to make it cost effective. But so three to 5,000 donors. Once you have that, then you can start doing direct mail.
And you have to have their street address too.
You have to have their street address, right?
Yeah.
Well, if they're making a gift, then you get their street address
Well,
because
true. Okay,
they're
got it.
receiving. In our case, we always advise people to do an online acknowledgement, but a direct mail receipt. Let me give you the difference. If you were to go to one of our clients, one of our ministries today, and you wanted to give a gift, when you gave that gift, you would immediately get an email or a web page that would said, "Thank you for your gift.
Yeah.
We appreciate your support," and all of that would be right there. But then 3 days later, you're going to get a letter in the mail that says, "Phil, we really appreciate that gift you gave us." And at the bottom of that, there's what we call a bounce back. There's a little tear off for you to send your next gift. That is just so effective. That one extra step. It might cost, 50 cents, 60 cents, 70 cents to mail the receipt. It pays dividends exponentially. Truly does. So it's important not just because a lot of smaller ministries say, "Oh, I'm giving them an email receipt. That's enough." It isn't enough. They need to get that follow-up touch because you're building relationship. It's always about building relationship. And so I think, those recognize that people are giving a lot of ways, just like people are using different screens for different things. You're looking at the computer, you're looking at your TV, you're looking at your phone,
Yeah.
and you can watch a video on all of those things. So people are giving through multiple platforms. If it's convenient to do it by their phone, they're going to give it on their phone. Text to give is important. Being able to give easily through an app is important. Being able to give on your web is important. Reduce the friction, make it easy for people to give, and make sure that you're always thanking them and building a relationship. Because donors are not vending machines; they are people who care, people who care enough to give out of their own resources to help your ministry and your mission. And we need to appreciate and value them for what they do.
Now, when you're starting out, how do you integrate social media into all this? Is it okay to ask for donations on social media? Or we use that to tell the story? Or what? How do you make that a part of the mix?
We never ask for a gift on social media. We present a cause on social media and invite people to click to a landing page, and then we allow them to give on that landing page. And we found that while you can do that through posting, doing it through the ad campaigns are actually much more effective because you can target your audience much more specifically. So if you're starting out, you need to do a little of both. One ministry right now, it's very small. They're posting and boosting because that's all they can afford to do, post and boost. And they're getting some response from that. But at some point here, we're going to need to get them to put a few $100s into a campaign so we can target those campaigns a little bit better and get better response though.
Fantastic. What have we left out? Anything?
I think that that covers most of it.
That's Fundraising 101. Fundraising 101 in the digital world, huh?
Yeah, our job used to be easy. It was all paper. Yours was all video. Now it's all kinds of technical stuff, all kinds of platforms, and it's just much more complicated.
Well, first of all, tell us how to reach out to Infinity Concepts. If people want to explore some of these options you've mentioned, how do we get in touch with you?
infinityconcepts.com. That's our website. We would love for people to go. Our research reports are all there and free, available to be downloaded. Just go to infinityconcepts.com/resources. And if you go to Infinity Concepts, there's cross links for IDX Pro and some of the other things that we do, because I think IDX is really a tool that can propel a ministry forward very quickly in a very cost-effective way. So that's another tool.
Well, honestly, I think you've probably done more work than anybody I know into helping smaller ministries launch. Some of these digital techniques that you've pioneered have been really remarkable in helping small ministries launch. So certainly you work with huge ministries around the world, but also if somebody's watching or listening that has, is talking about launching something significant, or you're at a place where you're ready to do this, Mark definitely has a team to talk to. So I think this would be a great option. So thank you very much for being on, man. I always enjoy talking to you. I always learn something. I've been writing notes here myself. So, and don't use info. I've definitely got that down. Well, that answered a lot of questions for me and really helped a lot, because it is a changing world out there. And speaking of fundraising, I would encourage you to check out our nonprofit, the Influence Lab. Just go to influencelab.com, and it's an amazing effort to try to teach and train Christians in digital strategies for reaching the world with the gospel. That's simple as that. I've said before that I wish churches could change the way they think about missions. Instead of just being about geographical boundaries, it should also be about digital boundaries. After all, by population, the largest country on the planet is Facebook. But who's sending missionaries to that country? Who's planting churches in that country? So I think that the Influence Lab is our effort to teach and train. I'll tell you, at any given moment, I have between 8 and 10 invitations to come speak, teach, train, bring teams. We were in Accra, Ghana last year with a team of a video editor, a church media producer, an acting teacher, a screenwriting teacher, a social media expert, and me. And we went all over there and spent a week doing an intensive multiple tracks for almost 300 Christian filmmakers and church media professionals from all over Africa. They all came in for an intensive week of training. So, boy, I tell you, I could do that in countries all over the world. We just have that many invitations. But fundraising is a problem. So, hey, I'd love for you to go and help us jumpstart that and give a donation to the Influence Lab, influencelab.com. Check it out. And I think it would be a great blessing for you. And it's certainly going to bless churches and ministries all over the world, even in very, very difficult countries, we can reach into through this digital training. So think about the Influence Lab the next time you think about giving. And of course, stay tuned for our next episode of the Phil Cooke Podcast.